So my name is Andy Rheaume. I work for the City of Redmond Stormwater Utility, and we were asked to come because we have an example of implementing a watershed plan at the local government scale. Oh yeah, they have a little clicker here. So has anybody here put your hand up if you heard me talk about watershed planning before? All right, good deal. So I've done this a few times now, and I was told by a certain person that used to work for ecology but now works for Kirkland, that won't say any names, that she's sick and tired of my old presentation, so we're going to try something new today, so hopefully we'll entertain you guys. Yeah, there's some applause for the former ecology employee. Okay, so that's let's see if I can be smarter than the buttons. There we go. All right, just to quick tell you what we're going to tell you about. I'm going to go into, well, why did Redmond even create a watershed plan? It's something we were required to do. So we'll get into that. We're going to briefly touch on what does the plan do, and the new part, for some people that are tired of hearing me talk about the same thing again and again, is the lessons learned. And I hope this will be hopefully helpful. We're about 4 years into implementing watershed plan, and so I hope it'll give you guys some good food for thought as you embark on your next permit. I think everybody here is aware that there's a very likely chance the permit will have some sort of watershed planning requirement in it. So, why did Redmond create a watershed plan? The most important thing, I think most of us know here, but just to make sure, most of existing development does not have stormwater controls that are protective of critical areas. Most of the development that was built prior to 2013 basically has no controls, and so all that development basically it just impacts the streams. The picture here is an example. This is a $40 million vault. It's underneath the Sears parking lot in Overlake, and it detains about 200 acres of area. And so this is the kind of the scale that you are looking at if you're serious about trying to undo the past damages that we've done by not requiring stormwater controls. I think everybody's aware that the phase one permittees, NPDES permittees, they did a watershed planning exercise, as a modeling exercise, to try to figure out, not all of them, but some of them. And what we found was and it's nice because we do have about $3 million of modeling research done, and I think people are going to start hearing more and more about that. I was involved with the King County watershed planning effort, and we all landed at the same number, around $26 million per square mile. So this is 200 acres and it's 40 million. And so that, if you think about it, that's on average, by the way, the 26 million per, so a square mile is 640 acres. So if you're in an urban area, it's not just $26 million per square mile, it's much, much more. Someday, if you're interested, I know some of you have been in there, but you can actually enter this thing. It'd be like a spray painter's, graffiti guy's mecca. I mean, it's this huge, gigantic structure underground. It's pretty amazing to see. And you're welcome, City of Bellevue. Are you here? Bellevue here? Oh, they're not even here. Well, this drains to Bellevue. This is like the corner of Redmond, and it drains to their creek. So we sent them a bill, and they never paid it, but we'll keep trying. So this is kind of an animation. So in 1936, this is basically the stream there. That's Bear Creek. It's a very important creek to us, but it doesn't really matter a whole lot in this slide. But what it shows is that between 1936, there was nothing in this area of Redmond. By 1996, you can see that something changed, and all of that had basically no stormwater controls. And then, it did it by itself, 2013. So if you saw the difference, there wasn't a whole lot. And so that was what we're trying to show you, is that there's a huge backlog of need out there. So that was one of the reasons. We knew we had a huge problem with stormwater management, quite frankly, bigger than a local government can manage financially. So we wanted to start thinking about, well, how are we going to take on this monumental task? The other piece was the Growth Management Act, and Erica is still here. I hope she did a good job laying down the foundation for what the Growth Management Act is. And what I wanted to point out, in addition to what she said, is that local governments are required by the Growth Management Act to have a facilities plan. How many do you have a facilities plan for your stormwater system? Does it include restoring streams? Is streams one of your assets? No? Okay. So a facilities plan is important. Like your water supply plan, your sewer plan, you're supposed to have a plan about how you're going to accommodate growth going forward. And what we can do, and what we have been doing, is the permit requires us to require development to mitigate on their site. So if you follow that mindset, you're going to end up with a system like this, where it's everywhere, it's unplanned, it's extremely expensive. In the Growth Management Act, which was talked about earlier, there's regional growth centers. So what we did, so this is one of Redmond's 2 regional growth centers. It's a little bit different. This area is actually a subset of the regional growth center, but let's just call it the regional growth center. And what we did was we showed council and said, well, this is what's going to happen. And they looked at that and they said, that's a lot of red. I mean, that's a lot. How are we going to get all the density into this regional growth center and realize the vision of the Growth Management Act and try to create a regional center connected by transportation and manage infrastructure? This is what we actually built by planning. And you can see that it's pretty obvious. The cost up front, I think we're at a click of about $50 million. This is not the vault that I showed you the picture of. This is a whole separate part of the city. But you can see that by planning it and planning ahead, we hope we find efficiencies. I mean, maintenance efficiencies obviously is a no-brainer, but just the longevity of it, replacing it, managing it. And we did set up a system where people actually, anybody that's in this yellow area here has to pay us. It's not an option. You know, I just want to do it on my site. And when we said, no, you're going to pay. You have to pay. We built the thing for you so you can maximize the development on your parcel. So this is just one of the pieces of why we started Watershed Plan. We did this before we did Watershed Planning. This kind of like whet our appetite, if you will, because we did all this and we thought this is great. You know, we should start planning. And then it was like, well, wait a second. This thing drains to the Schimek River. And has anybody been near the Schimek River lately? It's going to take a whole lot more than Redmond to fix. But we wanted to actually start thinking about this and planning this type of thing for streams that we thought we could bring back. Of course, we have a debt service of about, I'm guessing around $90 million, $100 million right now. So like, we don't have a whole bunch of cash laying around or of capacity for further debt service to try to fix streams. So we'll get into that here in just a second about a funding mechanism. And then Dan's here to really get into the funding mechanism. So real quick, the Growth Management Act also requires us to protect critical areas. The Growth Management Act does not say, go ahead, just trash the environment and make sure you get as many people packed in. It actually, there are equal pillars across the requirements of your comprehensive plan, and you're supposed to have a healthy environment as well as provide growth and as transportation and services. So I always try to keep that in front of everybody because critical areas include streams, which is what we kind of manage stormwater for, on top of make sure people don't flood. And I guess that's set it up there just a little bit too. So it reduces sprawl of the Growth Management Act. So we're embracing that in Redmond by implementing regional growth centers. And the focused population and jobs in growth centers, it's important to point out, I think for a lot of cities, everybody's feeling the pain of all the new development and all the traffic and all the people coming here. There's some 80,000 people that came to Seattle last year alone. Is that right? Is it 80,000? Anyways, that's a lot of people. And if we didn't start putting people in regional centers and making sure regional centers can accommodate a whole bunch of growth, it would affect all of the neighborhoods. And so as local governments, what we want to do is to make sure we protect the neighborhoods we have, create a variety of housing. And the way to do that really has held up the test of time. I mean, 1990 to now, we're still implementing what I think was a good plan, was like pack people into those areas, make hopefully we find a better way for affordable housing, but that's basically where it would be, is in the regional centers. So the last reason we did it is that the city of Redmond is actively involved in salmon recovery. And so we've been a participant in the Y-Rate Salmon Recovery Plan for some time now. We've implemented a lot of projects, a lot of local contribution to projects, and then they match your projects too. If you have never done a Y-Rate application, I encourage you to do one. There's Jason right here, Mobile Hill Kuntz, is the Y-Rate chair. You can talk to you about grant opportunities and funding. But that was one of the things we wanted to do, is like, hey, let's get smarter about where we're going to put these investments. And like, I think I was going to talk about it later, but let's bring it up now. So King County did let's call it $1.5 million study because of the phase 1 permit, and it was, of course, stormwater centric, but King County took the step and said, well, wait a second, let's use all the tools we've got in the toolbox. Stream rehabilitation in-stream, buffer improvements, programs, and things like that to try to fix the streams. And what they found was stormwater alone, at the click of $26 million a square mile, this is going to bring back your stream. It literally will not do it alone. And so you have to do these other things on top of that. There's no permit requiring you to do this, but I'm just telling you right now, if you don't do these things too, you're not going to have any healthy streams. So, and we proved it, I would say, pretty effectively with the model that we created. So, so what does our plan do? So we provided a baseline of scientific information, and I think that's what the permit is envisioning for the first, at least the information we've gotten out of ecology so far is they want all permittees to start planning. Like, well, how are your streams doing? Which ones are doing good? Which ones are really bad? Which ones do you think you could fix? That type of thing, which is the next step, is to prioritize what you're going to fix. That is by no means to say you're going to write streams off. We've had a really interesting example that Gary's going to talk about Microsoft, which drains to 3 different streams. Some of them we prioritized, some of them aren't prioritized, but because Microsoft is going to redevelop some 400 acres, 500 acres, it's a great opportunity for even the streams that we didn't prioritize. Did we plan for that? Did we know? No, we had no idea, but we're grateful that we're going to have 500 acres of improved watershed, basically, for a stream. So the last one there, I touched on that. So the toolbox, just like I said, you can't do this with stormwater alone. This isn't going to be something that's going to get resolved with stormwater alone. So you got to look at programs. You got to look at stream and habitat projects. And then monitoring effectiveness, I think, and I thank everybody in the room that's a NPDES permittee, because everybody pays into an effectiveness monitoring program in which you guys are paying for Redmond's effectiveness monitoring. So we're monitoring streams. Some we're focusing on, some we're not focusing on right now, to try to see, because we've illustrated very well as an organization or as an industry how we can trash a stream with development, and we've documented that all over the country. We're having a hard time finding anybody that said, okay, try to fix it now and monitor it and show us that you can actually fix a stream. So we're trying to do, I've heard litmus test, stormwater litmus test, that type of thing. So that's something that we're doing in the city of Redmond, and you can use that information. It's not like it's not transferable. So this is kind of an interesting point. What does it do? So it sets goals for recovery. We actually have a target date and certain streams that we're going to try to fix. Very lofty goals. Will we meet the goals? I hope so. I will probably be dead by that time, but I hope that it happens. But it does come down to level of service. So that was something that we've learned with the phase 1 permits the modeling that was done. We might need to rethink what we think the target is, especially in urban areas. If you think a stream in an urban area should function and operate like a forested stream, I hope you were willing to spend a lot of money on your stormwater utility bill, because I don't know if that's possible. I mean, a lot of stuff that we've seen with the modeling exercises has shown that it's not a very likely outcome for a lot of urban streams. And so maybe we need to have a real in-depth conversation as a region about what is it we're trying to accomplish with the stormwater requirements. We set up a stormwater control transfer program. That's what this slide was intended for you not to read. You can have a copy of it. I can email it to you if you'd like to see it. But we set up, and it's harder than you would think to figure out, well, how much would you allow people to transfer off of their development site and into a regional facility you built to recover a stream. And I'm going to leave it at that, because Dan's going to go into a lot more detail about what a stormwater control transfer program is. I just want to brag that the city of Redmond has the only stormwater control transfer program that you can use to transfer low impact development requirements, treatment requirements, and flow control. Thank you. Thank you. And I think that was because nobody saw us do it. And now that it became a bigger issue, it's just flow control. But so, and it does set up, like I said earlier, set up goals and targets, but it's a long-range plan for stormwater management and stream management. So I touched enough about the regional watershed planning, I think. The only other takeaway is, if you think it's easy to go, we only have 10 more minutes. Oh my. if you think it's easy to work across jurisdictions that have different stormwater manuals and everybody's on each other's list for potentially making you violate your permit type of thing, things get interesting real fast. And so working together is super important because our streams don't follow jurisdictional boundaries. And I think I hand it off to Gary here. I'll only give him 10 more minutes.
That's right. Perfect. So again, thanks to Andy and got Peter Holt here and others, and for the plan itself. I came into Redmond 2.5 years ago, so I'm the Natural Resource Division Manager. So I had nothing to do with creating the plan, but I'm here to kind of share experiences from the past 2.5 years implementing the plan, working very closely with our mayor's office, the mayor's directors team, council members, and our stakeholders. And as Andy said, it's not easy. It's actually quite fun, but it's not easy. So a few points to keep in mind as hopefully many of you go through this as well. Asset management is going to have to be our foundation for planning going forward. And I'm an environment, Andy's an environment that is very supportive. The city's supportive, council's supported, citizens, business developers are actually supportive. However, there's always a however, right? They're very analytical in Redmond, very analytical and very concerned about the cost of government. So we have to be really clear on where we're headed and why we're headed and what the options are to get there. So how does asset management fit into that? Well, what citizens, the council, our executive team want to understand is what tools are you using to get to these desired outcomes in your watersheds? How effective actually are they and what are the costs? So it's lofty, but this is, and it's not just about gray infrastructure. This is about green infrastructure, gray infrastructure, in-stream habitat, and private assets. So we're trying to build our asset registry to include all of those so that we can actually roll up by watershed, right? What assets we have, how much we're spending on them. From the first talk we had today, how is our BIBI doing in that watershed relative to the costs we're putting into it? So we're not there, but that's how we're framing our asset management work. It's also about cost, right, and levels of service. So we're actually starting this year a level of service and return on investment analysis. So what this is going to get at is we're going to look at capital projects, our maintenance, operating programs such as our spill response, and communication, which is huge in our world for our PR campaigns. How much are we putting into them? What are we getting out? What happens if we turn the dials, right? So that's what council wants to see. That's what our mayor's office wants to see. That's what citizens are asking. So they're not asking to change the vision. It's there. That's why it's great to have the plan, but they want to know what are the alternatives to get there because of that limited funding. I skipped over the Microsoft a little bit, but that kind of gets into the next kind of slide with stakeholders and such. But having this plan is amazing in many ways, but just using Microsoft, that little old company that most of you know about, I've been preliminary invited to, along with our deputy mayor, to attend a brainstorming for their new campus redesign. And I get to bring this plan along, right? So I've already got something to talk about, and they're going to be really excited because my pitch is going to be, how can you make us reach these goals by 2060? What part do you want to have in here? And that's why we have to be flexible because we may be doing less capital projects on our own and maybe doing a lot of partnering over the next 5 years. So again, goals are staying the same, but how we get there may be very different than we thought of when you were developing this. Stakeholders. So I think like any other utility, we kind of went to our community after options analysis and told them how great of a project this was going to be and kind of wanted their support. And that is not working anymore. It's worked in the past. Sometimes we didn't need it, but we have a very different approach now. We need to bring everybody along, bring the stakeholders along from the beginning and meet people where they are at. And really enjoyed Mary's talk this morning. In the sense how we were running it, we weren't really being equitable. We really need to be equitable. And I think what that means, back to the asset management, is working with the community, coming up with various options and how we can get to our goals that may look different, and using the triple bottom line. So cost, but environmental issues and social issues. And you know what? It's our job to put those options up for council and then have them make decisions, because they may be willing to pay much more for something that has less social impacts. So we got to be really flexible with that and bring the community along. And Andy's got a great story for you offline about conversations he's had with a couple stakeholders over the past year where they really did not like us. And now we had some great conversations with them, but it was pretty tough. It was pretty tough, but it's actually very uplifting in some ways as well. Prioritization, again, very important, but and why it's important is council, others know, you've got a plan, you've got a roadmap, I like where you're headed. But some of the questions they're asking, how does this fit into the city vision? How does this fit into the regional vision? And the other reason they like the prioritization is they understand that there's a limited source of money and we have to make some hard decisions. And we did make hard decisions by prioritizing. So they appreciate that. And they also appreciate us being nimble and flexible when opportunities arise. Yeah, the flexibility, again, I can't overemphasize that, but the part you need to be careful on, you can't look wishy-washy, right? That you're always changing the plan. One suggestion, have is being clear on why you didn't know about this, why this was something that new that came up, what you're going to give up to do that, because the cash is what it is. You can't. It's not like typically these opportunities come with cash. So what you're going to defer, or how are you going to change your plan? And then it seems to go well. And then existing neighborhoods, this kind of goes back to the stakeholders as well. But what we've really learned is in Redmond, people are very on board with us to protect and preserve the environment. But, always that but, right? They have other values too, and especially when you're putting big facilities in their neighborhood. And that's why you have to get out there early and don't presume, like I may have done, that this really incredibly technically well-engineered project is something everybody was going to jump on board on. You just can't do that. You got to bring people on from the start. And typically, if you give them good information, we're going to get to a good spot, but have to have that conversation. And then Andy, you were going to finish up here at this last bullet since you're so passionate about it.
It's the show me the money bullet. So I know the Stormwater Financial Assistance Program was created, and some of you worked with me on that. I was the local government representative on it. So there's $57 million or so a year that the state puts out for local governments to build stormwater retrofits. Basically, it can't be used to meet permit requirements. Very helpful, very good beginning. Not nearly close to what we need. And I do emphasize, because I know that the EPA was here earlier and the state's still here. You can't put this on local governments alone. We can't even fix our highways without Federal Highway Authority giving the state money to give to us to do it. This is huge. This is a huge amount of money that if we're going to take it on seriously, it needs to start there. That there's some sort of commitment from not only local governments but from the state and from the federal government to help us address the issue. We've always followed the permit requirements. They actually decided where the lines were going to be on the permit requirements. So I feel like there's some obligation there. This is just my thing, and I'll tell any one of them that I can get in front of me, because you do not want your storm utility bill to be about $300 a month or more. And I think that's our last slide. Did we burn our time? Oh, we got 5 minutes. How about that? There we go. Is there questions?